Good morning also from our side. So I want to just take you a bit onto our journey, what we had over the last couple of years into open source. And as a first slide, I wanted to give you a bit of context about our company. So of course, China Mobile, you are the biggest, but we are also not bad. So we have 300 million global customers. And on the top left, you can see we are the #1 European brand. Would you believe Deutsche Telekom, such a boring company, but #1 most valued brand in Europe. And we are also the #1 global telco brand. And we rank on place #9 among all brands worldwide. And that includes, of course, the Apples, the Alphabets, the Metas of this planet. So only some room for improvement, I would say. But #9 is not bad, and we are really proud on that one. Then we consider ourselves the unmatched network leader, and that's true for the 5G network in US, Germany, and in our European footprint. If you take like the benchmark companies like the Ooklas of this world, they rank us the #1 in our footprint. Of course, this also leads to a strong customer experience, and the area where I am from is on the bottom left, the automation area, and there we consider ourselves also among the leaders. And then what's that thing in the middle? That's our famous flywheel. That's our company strategy. And I keep it short, but it starts with the investment. We invest more than our competition into our networks. And this leads to more customers. And if you have more customers on the network, you have bigger efficiencies. And bigger efficiencies lead to better financials. This can even understand persons who upload their pictures to ChatGPT for free. Up it. I know. And how does that link to our journey into open source? You see the two circles, one inner circle and one outer circle. And this is an update which we included last year to our strategy. We go for global scale now. And then, scale means platforms, and you will understand in a minute how that is linked into open source. And the second one is, of course, data and AI. So this will speed up our flywheel even more and accelerate, and that's what we want to do over the next couple of years. Then my role is an architect. So I try to bring the slide with the most boxes. I'm not sure if I succeeded actually, but it has a lot of boxes. But surprisingly, even our management picked up this slide on the Capital Market Day end of last year. And magenta means what do we do in common across our footprint, and white means where do we stay specific. And you see we are in the heart with Nathan, with his API topic, and it's already fully magenta. And I'm working on that software automation. Of course, I have to do more homework than him. It's partly white, but of course, again, open source plays a role in how do we automate the software and how do we scale on that one. Does that mean we do everything with open source? No, of course not. There are other operators who are doing more than us, and not specifically to open source, but in that make area. So where we take the own responsibility for integrating, for operating, and for maintaining the entire software across the life cycle. But there are also operators who do less than us, who rely more on the vendor ecosystem. And that's maybe my first message. We want to be in the sweet spot, take responsibility, take the open source where it makes sense, where we strategically need it, and where we benefit the most out of it. And you can see on the right one why we think that if we would bet too much on the vendor ecosystem, we would become too dependent, vendor locked in, etc., etc. And if we do too much on our own, that could be a snowflake risk, and that's why we see ourselves in the middle. So I think we were outspoken on what we are doing with that own-up. We were taking components of that, and we were building our own SMO platform. Why did we do that? First reason is strategic. We opened up the ecosystem with the great help of Alex at that point in time with the ORAN. And why should we, put a vendor-dependent solution on top, right, Alex? That was our thinking, and that's why we needed open source on top of our ORAN, and that's why we built our SMO platform with that open source. Of course, it also has to do with the life cycles, because the network functions, are they disaggregated or cloudified, they have much quicker life cycles. They can be exchanged in a much quicker way. And that's where we didn't want to be dependent on someone, but we wanted to control our fate on that one. It's of course also about the, let's say, shared effort across the community, where we are really thankful to build on that one. It's also, if I compare to other areas where we work with vendors, it's also financially attractive, I have to say. You can see all these key KPIs in blue on the bottom. I think for the sake of time, I want to speak a bit about this one, because this shows our journey into the open source. And Arpit was mentioning this morning that OwnUp is underway since almost 10 years. We came late to the party, that's around 2018, 2019. But then we were really taking it seriously from there. And you can see that we first were working on the cloud part of things by integrating 4G core, 5G core. We did a proof of concepts. And you see on the Y scale how we improved and matured also towards MVPs and products from 2021. And yeah, on the right-hand side, you see also how the team was growing, so our FTE numbers, and also what we actually picked up as projects, everything around ORAN, everything around configuring of CRAN, but also non-RT-RIG is one topic we are doing. And then also basically we cover, let's say, as a target state, the entire RAN management system with our TNAP, TAS OS prospectively. Good. So that brings me already to the end of my part of the presentation. Just the takeaways. Don't try to boil the ocean. Carefully select where you want to go. Go for strategic relevance, like if you want to become independent from the vendor, if you want to differentiate by the network among your competitors. Think of using open source where there are short network life cycles, like cloud, like RAN. Start small. We started very small with a very small team of 3 to 5 engineers taking open source to the lab, but start. And in the end, go for solving real business problems. Don't stay in that lab status, but make it relevant and help the business in solving problems. Of course, the last one I couldn't let you go with, you need to have an agile mindset. This is very important. Without that, if you stay in the typical telco way, you won't succeed. And the last one, that's what I borrowed from our colleagues in T-Mobile US. We won't stop on that one. with that, handing over to you, Nathan. Oh, you have your own.
No, mine doesn't work, but I'll take that one. That's fine. Does that mean I'm out of time? All right. I've got a little bit of time without the buzzer then. All right, so I'm going to talk about that middle box that Sebastian pointed to on our API monetization journey. And actually, it started out very similar to what Libby described just before we all went on break. We were doing a lot of work on edge compute 5 years ago when edge compute, or MEC, was the super exciting thing. And we spent a lot of time analyzing it. And we looked at it, and fundamentally, we realized that Germany's not that big. Germany sits in the middle of the cloud world in Frankfurt there. And Germany, the population was very sort of evenly distributed. Our data centers were fairly evenly distributed. And what we actually concluded was that we can't actually solve much by moving things closer to the edge because we would save about 3% on our end-to-end latency. But that actually pointed to the bigger problem, and that was that the radio had about 65% of the latency. And so that started us actually thinking and saying, well, maybe we should focus on that first. And we got to the point where we said, okay, let's build an API that we give to developers that then they can fix that 65% latency and make it a little better. So that's what we did. And we started with a bunch of trials, a lot of testing, POCs, and we were able to find a few customers that were interested. The problem is that only let us serve one type of customer. And that customer was somebody who's only in our market, so in this case, only in Germany, only used SIM cards from Deutsche Telekom. And as we looked for more of those unicorn customers, we found just that. They were unicorns. And it didn't help us all that much. So we learned a few things. We learned that very few customers actually fell into that case. There's some, but very few. Now, it brought two major problems forward towards us. And that's the fact that all of the developers that we were talking to really wanted market coverage at the minimum. So maybe they don't want the world, but they at least in this case wanted Germany or the full market coverage, which basically means that we need to work with our friends in Vodafone, we need to work with our friends in Telefonica to cover that German footprint. The other thing we learned quite quickly was that those APIs we built were really too complicated. They're hard to use, and they require information about the network that we as a telco industry don't typically publish. We don't want to share our information about our network, and of course, everybody's information is different because we all have a different mix of vendors and everything like that. So that brought us to our first kind of solve. We said, okay, how can we make something easy? And how can we ensure that it works across multiple footprints? And that led us to the fact that we needed to find a way to soft standardize things. We didn't want to go down a path of traditional telco standards because we felt that could be a little too slow for us. But at the same time, we also wanted to work directly with the developers. And the biggest problem we had is how can we work with developers because we're so terrible at it. We've never really done this before. And we said, okay, well, where can we go to do that? And that was saying maybe a Linux Foundation type foundation or project or something like that, where we can collaborate jointly with the developers in open source in a space that they're familiar with. The developers don't have to try to call up a giant telco and get through a robot call center to find the 1-800 I need developer help. And so we said, let's do it there. So we started talking to lots and lots of other telcos, industry players, hyperscalers, and everyone else in between, and said, we want to build this open source project. Is that of any interest? And we thought that could solve two things. It could solve the standardization, where we had this common API available if everybody implements these open source based standards. And it allows us to simplify it. So we can come in, create an intent-based developer-facing API, and then leave all the hard, difficult stuff in the background for us to to solve on our network. We can take and figure out internally all of the systems we've got to connect to and everything else. And so far, it seems to be growing. My stats are probably a little wrong because it seems like it changes all the time. And as our Pit said even earlier, we're now on to our second release of Meta APIs. So we have lots of APIs out there and growing. So that's been fairly good so far. And that helped us solve the second type of customer needs. So now we can go and find customers that are multi-market, but really only have a single operator. Because in that case, we have an API available, it's standard, but what happens is that everybody from all of the developers have to go out there and talk to all of the telcos, get their contracts, get it all sorted out. So while we have CAMARA, we have things standardized, we have it simple, we still ended up with our next set of problems. And that was the fact that we found that the customers, while they can still now maybe make it work in a single market by getting a contract with all of the operators there, we found that they really wanted a single API endpoint. We want to make it easy for the developers. They want to be able to have one place to call. It lands in the right telco network. They don't have to try to figure out which network their customers are on and all of the challenges there. So we found that we needed some sort of an aggregation play to make this work. Now, there's a lot of commercial aggregation players out there already today, but we felt that maybe that will not work because that's a very fragmented market already, and trying to get this kind of global, ubiquitous coverage was going to be a challenge for us. And so we again sat down, started thinking, and we've come up with a company that was announced last year called Aduna. Now, Aduna as an entity that we founded with a group of other operators and some vendors to go out there and make this an independent company, to aggregate APIs, to make it simple. But the nice thing about this is that Aduna is making products that are CAMARA API. So back to our standard set of APIs that we're making available, simplified to developers. All they're doing is taking those APIs from all of us as a telco organization, putting it together in a simple aggregated manner, and then offering it out to various channels so that they can get those APIs created. And the developers can come what they want: a single bill, a single API endpoint, a single way to get consent, and have everything simple and common. So that then led us now to getting a larger group. Now we can target those customers that sit in this multi-market, multi-operator, which ultimately was the end goal that we were chasing, so that we can get these APIs out there, start commercializing them, and that's what we've actually done. So to wrap it up, we've now got the foundation for success started. We've got the ecosystem built, and now we're just seeking the adoption that's starting to come, and of course, the monetization that comes along with it. So, a little bit of journey, but we feel that we're getting there and have actually started to see some first revenues on open source CAMARA APIs. Thanks.